they were entering their home. Cele says he is optimistic that police will make a breakthrough.
I'm with Police Minister Cele here in Newcastle at the Nomadi Farm, where last week an elderly couple was murdered. Thank you for your time, Minister. Can you just tell us you're here today to give reassurances to the family? But maybe the important questions are there any leads since that murder last week?
Well, yes, we were at the family home as we speak. We have just met the family. Well, looks like the family is coping. We are glad the way we see them coping. The question you are asking, yes, I'm comfortable with the report I've received from the head of the investigating here, Brigadier Mbele, that we are having some leads going forward. I hope that he is not going to take too long. He is responsible for the investigating of killing of the farmers around this area. We are having about 7 farmers since last year that have been killed, and looks like, including the housebreaking, looks like we have made a good progress in arresting those. The only case that we haven't arrested anybody is this refugee case that is new, but looks like we are following a correct direction.
Minister, maybe the other question is strategy in dealing with farm killings. Matters came up at the community meeting that there's a shortage maybe of police personnel, about 20 police if I'm not mistaken in this area. Also a lack of cars to patrol the area, and you spoke about maybe the fact that the police has to collaborate with the private security. Can you talk to us about the strategy going forward in this area and in the farming community in general?
Well, we have a national strategy of of safety when it comes to farming community that we launched last year in Limpopo. This is a Deputy National Commissioner, Masimula, responsible for the strategy. What we need to do is to localize it.
Tulani Msimang in Durban there, of course, but in Normandy speaking to the police minister, Cele there. So claims of corruption have hampered government's efforts to disburse COVID-19 relief funds, and a report by the Auditor-General Kimi Makwetu is damning. The report shows how IT systems used in government were not agile enough to respond to urgent challenges. Makwetu says his team found that the rapid disbursement of large sums of money increased the risk for fraud and corruption. The Auditor-General joins me now live. A very good evening to you, Auditor-General. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hello, good evening, Criselda.
Auditor-General, I think let's start here. I mean, straight after you had released your findings a bit earlier on today, we subsequently learned of multiple suspensions, including at the UIF. And, there had been previously, glitches in the payment system and controls that had to be upgraded multiple times. I'd like to get your opinion. Do you think that those in charge should be held accountable for this?
When you ask me, are you asking me in relation to what the minister did today?
Absolutely.
Well, Criselda, in any system of control where there are lapses, and these lapses were under the watchful eye of people that are in office, it ought to be expected in some cases that when there's sufficient information to suggest that they didn't do what was expected, that those that are charged with oversight of those institutions should act as they deem appropriate. And I'm sure the minister spoke for himself in articulating the basis on which he took the action. But I think in principle, the concept of accountability comes sometimes with people having to be taken off the horse.
And Auditor-General, I think this definitely speaks to one of the issues that you often speak about, a lack of basic controls in the system. From what you had told the South African public earlier on today, it certainly seems like there was a lapse somewhere in basic controls on the payment of these monies.
Oh, no doubt, Criselda, and we've been preaching this message for many years. And I think that it's beginning to sink because people are listening attentively now. And of course they have in the past. We can't blame them, but they have. But the reality is that if we all went into our homes and we didn't lock the doors, the chances are that in our sleep there might be people that are roaming around inside the house. That's exactly the same principle that applied with internal controls. If you lower the guard and the barrier to entry is low, there is likely to be the group of people who know better how to get into those systems and do stuff that you as the person put in charge also cannot immediately explain, because public funds are dispersed for use by wide audiences, but there are also other interested parties out there whose business and trade is to sit in a little corner and also write a combination of the zeros and the ones that go into programming computer systems. And then that's why they are able to access a computer environment without having to step inside the building. It is situations like those. So when you announce that you are going to have a package of payments that are going to be dispersed over a short period of time to wide audiences across the country, you have to expect that there will be those that have got other tools who are going to want to be ahead of you.
And I guess, Auditor-General, Auditor-General, that the concern now would be how will these funds be recovered? Earlier you spoke about overpayments, multiple overpayments that have been done. How can this money be recovered? Auditor-General, are you still with us? I think we might be experiencing a bit of some interruption in your line there. Can you hear me now, Auditor-General?
I can hear you clearly, Griselda.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm glad to have you back on. Auditor-General, I was saying, I guess the concern now is how will these funds be recovered?
So we've selected many of the transactions that look suspect, as well as those where there's definite indication that there were overpayments. And we're going to hand over those lists to that multi-agency fusion center and ask them to also put in their own lenses to these transactions so that we can get them to be expedited quickly.
And what we've seen also during COVID-19 is that some companies with no track record whatsoever been given contracts, to deliver things like PPE. I mean, how many such companies are being referred to the SIU from this investigation that you've conducted thus far, Auditor-General?
Well, as I said, when it comes to the procurement of goods and services, we also try to apply computerized audit techniques, combining them with forensic investigative tools and tests. And we've identified many of those instances and those lists as well. When we brief the Fusion Center, we will be passing on those lists to them to even look deeper to those specific entities. For example, some of the initial findings that we have made are in respect of entities that were granted some of these tenders, but they do not appear anywhere in the national tax database. So it is situations like those that we think ought to be followed up, because remember, the source of these funds is largely from the National Revenue Fund, which you and I pay into every month. And therefore, when someone then gets awarded money from that pot, the minimum expectation at least is for them to also be on the same tax system, contributing their bit to the whole. So those are some of the instances that in the past were taken lightly, and we believe that in the context of this COVID-19, it is quite urgent for those to be looked at with critical eye by SARS, who I understand is also part of that Fusion Center.
Auditor-General, we're fast running out of time. Last question in there. There has to be some kind of accountability. This is a conversation that we often have about funds that are meant for particular use, in particular for the poor, that are siphoned in this particular manner. Where is the accountability? What needs to happen to ensure that this is nipped in the bud?
Well, there was a sign of that if you followed the activity that took place driven by the Minister of Employment and Labour. It is matters of that kind that make it visible to you and I that something is being done to address some of the stuff that's been found. Let's hope that when the Fusion Center completes its own exercise, because even our own work on procurement is continuing, so when they complete their own exercise, they will probably make some suggestions as to what the next steps are. So I think the system of accountability sometimes comes through very slow, but I think it is indeed a work in progress as I see what has emerged and what is likely to emerge for those that are now being tested and evaluated.
Auditor-General Kimi Makwetu, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. Let's take a short break here on the programme. We'll have much more when we get back. Stay with us.